There's nothing wrong with using technology to learn those things. Watch someone make sourdough bread, then go out and act upon it. What can I do with that information? The thing that I think is really, really difficult about a phone is that the distance between being on task and being off task is a millisecond. It's just one quick swipe. Here I am on my phone to do something I want to do. And then I see this, and then I see this notification, then I think of this, and I'm way over here.
My name is Lisa, mother of 8 and creator of the blog and YouTube channel Farmhouse on Boone. Join me as I share with you my love for creating a handmade home from scratch cooking and a little mom and entrepreneur life along the way. Welcome back to the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. If you hear baby noises and you're not watching on YouTube and you're in the podcast app, yes, I do have the baby with me. This is kind of an every other year thing. So when I first started my podcast, my son Daniel was a 2-month-old. And then 2 years later, my son Theodore was a baby. And then here we are again 2 years later. So we're about, a year and a half. So yeah, we're like 3.5 years into this podcast, and every other year there are baby noises. So that is what is going on. If you hear little grunts and toots and nursing sounds, that's what's going on. Today, we are going to be chatting with Katie Westenberg, author of But Then She Remembered. This book is so good. I'm about halfway through it. It's How to Give God Your Full Attention in a Distracted World. So we're going to talk about the distractions that we have as modern women. I feel like it's worse now than ever, but then as we're going to talk about, distractions have always been a problem. And a lot of times, if you don't know what you should focus on, you will just find other things to distract yourself with. So we're going to talk all about that, screens and phones and distractions, and how to navigate that in your home. All right, let's dive in. All right, Katie, thank you so much for joining us here to talk about this really important topic that it's near and dear to my heart. I feel like it's something that we all constantly struggle with, and that is distraction. And, as Christians, that really ends up putting a block between us and our relationship with God, because every time we have a spare moment, instead of praying and taking every thought captive, we find ourselves reaching for a quick cell phone fix or whatever. So your book is called But Then She Remembered. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. It just came out this year, and it is really worn through the process of me just trying to live this out on my own, right? So we're convicted first before we engage in any process of writing this. So several years ago, just in parenting these kids that were becoming teenagers. So I have 3 out of 4 of my kids are teenagers in my house. I have a 13-year-old, 15-year-old, 18-year-old. So 3 or 4 years ago, when we were just kind of beginning this season of life, I felt challenged in that if I don't know how to navigate this technology wisely, if I find this pull and this tension with wanting to do it well, but not necessarily knowing how, because it is pretty new, these aren't things that I had to deal with when I was a teenager. If I don't know how to navigate that super well as an adult, how am I going to lead my children to navigate that well? So that struggle and the tension of distraction is really what was on my mind. And at the same time, anything I write is really just born out of time in scripture, time studying God's word. And so parallel to that was just me doing a deep dive reading through scripture and noticing the biblical call to remembrance and what happens when God's people forget. And so the convergence of those two ideas, okay, there's these people who set out to follow God, but were continually distracted. In their day, it looked a lot different, but they really did struggle with distractions in the same way. So what does that look like for us now? So that's really where the work came from.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through your book and I'm really enjoying it. There were a few things that stuck out just already that I'm kind of like relating to and thinking about. And one is that I forget exactly where this was in your book. I should have underlined it. But by removing the distraction, I think a lot of us think, okay, I'm just going to get rid of the thing that's the problem. I actually did this about 1.5 years ago. I got a dumb phone and I did it for about 6 months. I have my whole business is online. So I set it up with my virtual assistants and various things to where I definitely can go with the dumb phone. But what I found was that just like what your book said, I still was just as distracted. So I think in your book, you talk about how it doesn't really help to remove the thing. It's mostly figuring out what it is that you need to focus on, not just thinking, as long as I don't have that thing, I will be more productive in the thing that I want to do. And I could go on and on about how much this didn't work. Like basically it's really like embarrassing to say, but in a lot of ways, I carried my laptop around with me throughout the day. It didn't solve anything at all. In fact, it just made my life more difficult because everybody lives in a way that they expect you to have like the tickets on your phone or just a million things. It didn't work. And yet I was no less like I wasn't any more in God's word than, and that's what my intention was. I'm going to pray more. I'm going to be in God's word more. And I just like found other ways to get distracted.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And I've noticed the same things in my own life. I use a super practical, unrelated example in the book of like when you go on a diet, I'm going to go on a sugar fast, right? I'm not going to eat sugar for 30 days, but I'm going to eat chips and all the salty things. So what did I even do for my health in the meantime, right? And that's kind of what I noticed happen. And then the science behind that, the research kind of proves the same point on these social media fasts. And I think those can be good tools for dealing with symptoms because that's the problem. Distraction is really just a symptom. And so when we try to take that away, if we're not really settled about what we want to spend our time on, then we're going to feel it with other things. So this research by the University of Kentucky, they found that when people take these social media fasts and like, I'm not going to be on social media, I'm not going to do this. In the end, when they tracked those people, they found that they didn't spend that free time in any wiser ways. Yeah, so they binged Netflix instead and they did online shopping, right? Because that's who we are. When we're looking to fill a gap with entertainment, we're going to find it. So that doesn't really solve the problem. Not that those can't be helpful tools to guide us down a new direction, but if we're not set on what we really want our heart to chase after, then we're just going to find something else to fill the void.
Yeah. So like some more examples of me trying that same approach, even with the cell phone, is I take apps off my phone, which I still do constantly. I still feel like it helps me because I've gotten out of the habit of checking Instagram. And I found that even when I get Instagram back on my phone, because I have to post like something sponsored or something like that, I forget that it's there and I don't check it because my brain isn't used to checking it. But I'll be in a new habit of going on Pinterest or just like the Google app, like literally any app, like I find a different one that I get sort of addicted to. Yeah. So with all that being said, what is the solution? Like what is the plan for focusing on the good things whenever there's so many distractions right before us, which you're saying like there've always been distractions right before us.
Yeah. And that's what we see in scripture, right? So the Israelites, they're like lost in the desert. God already just performed these amazing wonders. They crossed the Red Sea. Then all of a sudden they're in the desert and like, yeah, maybe we just want to follow this golden calf instead. Maybe this is going to be our
That's so relatable, isn't it?
It is. We read that and we kind of think they're idiots, right? Like, oh my goodness, who does that? Like,
yeah.
Memory, right? So the same thing happens. And I love it when the science like follows exactly what God has commanded in the first place. So like with this Forbes article, it talks about how these business gurus are saying that they're finding the same thing, that the social media fasts and things like that haven't really been that helpful. And that the bottom line of their big article that we talk about in the book is just that we really have to get better at paying attention to what we want to pay attention to. So maybe it's not so much fighting all of those things, but getting real about how do I want to spend my days? How do I want to spend my time? And when we look at it that way, and we look at it honestly, maybe it's not as much about the minutes. Like, do we need entertainment sometimes, or do we need a break when you're caught in the busyness of life and like, I just need 5 minutes to take a break? There's healthy ways to do that. And maybe if that's like creatively searching Pinterest and looking at things like that, then that's fine. But it's putting that in the box and being aware of that. So it's not leaching into all areas of your life, because it easily does that. And then I guess being willing to take checks on that and think, where am I with this now? Is this a healthy thing? Because like you said, you use it for your job. You have to be in it, but it's a good tool that we can use in certain ways, but it does tend to creep into all the extra spaces.
Right. Yeah. Because we've always had distractions, right? But I do remember when I had my first couple of kids and we didn't have phones or internet back then, there were times throughout the day where at most I had the radio going and, you still are thinking, you're still taking your thoughts captive throughout that. It also made my days go a little bit longer too, because there was so much more dead space. So what are some of the things that we're sacrificing and losing by being distracted all the time and addicted? Like, we have these short attention spans. I think that's the biggest problem is our brains have changed to expect constant stimulation. What's the reason to not just throw the towel in and be like, oh, well, this is how it is?
A lot of us are that way, right? We're like, this is the way the world operates now. And we become a little bit apathetic. I don't really know what to do about it. So this is the game we play. But and I think some of that data will be bore out in time, right? Like when we see how our brains have changed over this period, because this is still relatively new technology and the way we engage with it is at a whole new level. So I do wonder that what kind of scientists and new researchers will not be developed because our time is spent on other things. But if we hone down even smaller from that, what conversations are missed in our homes? Right? What kind of engagement is missed? What kind of teaching is missed because I'm not engaging with my kids, I'm engaging with this. And I'm not only am I missing the moment, but at the same time, I'm teaching them how to deal with this technology. I'm teaching this is how we deal with it. When you're bored, when you have 5 minutes, when you're at a stoplight, this is what we do. If someone notifies me and my watch lights up, I will stop what I'm doing because I need to entertain this thing right in front of me. I have to get back to someone all the time. I have to be ever present. I have to know what's going on in all the places of the world. And it's really just a capacity we weren't made to operate at. So I think we lose the present. We lose the sense of the present, but we also are teaching our kids how to navigate that at the very same time.
Yeah, I think this is something we talk about all the time, probably to the point people are like, I know, I get it. We talk about this all the time, but it's such a growing and continuous problem that I think we all face in trying to how to navigate the fact that we do have a lot that we need to do. And there's also good things with it, but without it taking over every last thought. So in your book, you also talk about how it's important to first learn what we believe so that in those moments when we're not distracted, we can remember what's true. Can you talk a little bit about that whole concept?
Yeah. And that gets to the heart of why does this even matter? Why do distractions matter, right? If I want to be a person who numbers my days, and I believe the moments I have here are one, numbered, and two, mattered, and I believe that I want to live them for the glory of God, what does that look like, right? So what does that look like in the in-between minutes? Do those really matter? And if I want to remember that, that's kind of a hard thing to do because when you're busy at home and you have a lot of tasks and a lot of demands and you're homeschooling, there's a lot of things coming at me. How do I remember this big eternal perspective all of the time, right? So we talk about in the book, first, we can't remember that which we do not know. Okay. I can't go up to a 2-year-old who's never been taught the alphabet and say, tell me the alphabet. I don't know, right? So if we don't have a biblical worldview, if we don't have a high view of theology and believe that, okay, God placed me here for a purpose. He has good work for me to do in the world. What does it look like to live that out? And I have to know that. And then I have to keep coming back to that because here's a normal Wednesday, right? And it's kind of mundane because it's February and I've been homeschooling all year and I'm kind of tired of this and it doesn't feel magical and my house doesn't look magical anymore. It doesn't look like Pinterest, right? None of this is perfect and cute, but I have work to do. How do I stay focused today? How do I make math feel like it's eternal, right? And maybe feeling isn't what I'm after, but how do I keep in my mind that this has eternal value, what I'm doing right now? So that's the remembering part. We can't remember what we don't first know, but I want to know and then remember that my days are numbered. So can you give me a heart of wisdom? Can I pray that like the psalmist? Give me a heart of wisdom about the work I have to do today to see that this is important. And I don't know when the end of my life will be. So if it's tomorrow or if it's 100 years, I want to do a good job with today. I want to be faithful with what's in front of me today.
Yeah. I think that's all so important. It really impacted me whenever I was reading your book. There was a story you told about this man remembering I think it was a meal that his mom made. And it was like, he was saying something about how nobody ever could make it like she did. And really, he was remembering all of the feelings associated with the meal, not really the taste, because, it was, I forget what the meal was, but it was something that was like, it's pretty straightforward. It probably wasn't really that much better. But creating that feeling, I don't remember where that went, but it was something that I've been remembering ever since I read it.
Yeah. That man was like 70 years old, right? So he was talking about his mom and this meal in his kitchen in Alaska when he was like 10, right? And it was a total like uninvited store. We were at a farm store buying some potatoes, and he told my husband, like, I can't remember if it was Yukon Golds or what it was. He said, "Those are the ones you want." And my husband's like, "Oh yeah," and he's like, "Yeah, those are the ones my mom used to make." And he just went into this long story, all these heartfelt, like warming memories he had from his kitchen in Alaska. My mom used to make them this way, and I was so amazed by the process, thinking, man, can a meal mean that much? Because I don't think of that in my own kitchen. Was mail piled up around her kitchen? Was she exhausted and thinking, like, I don't have time for this. I'm not good at this. This is a crappy dinner. We're just going to put some potatoes out there. I don't know. But to hear his story when he's 70 years old, dressed up there in a farm store in overalls, I thought, man, there is power in the work we do. And who knows the stories that are going to be told from that and the things that are going to be remembered from that. So yeah, that was a really important story for me too.
All right, let's talk natural skincare. I've shared on here about Tubes & Co. so many times, but that is because I can't stop talking about them. I genuinely love it. My sisters and I, we're always texting, who's making an order? Add this to your order. We combine so we can all get free shipping. My mom, we all love their makeup and their skincare. So today I happen to only be wearing mascara and the eyebrow pencil, but I love the foundation. I have the palette for eyeshadow. So many of their products. I love them all. So I have completely switched my makeup over to Tubes & Co., which is saying something because natural skincare that has high quality ingredients, tallow from grass-fed cows, nothing synthetic, nothing on the list of things that you don't want to put on your skin. It's hard to find stuff like that actually works and makes you feel like you have makeup on. And I have found that in Tubes & Co., which is why I love sharing it. I also love their cleansing oil and their moisturizing creams. The tallow balm is my favorite. I have it sitting over bedside so I can put it on at night, especially this time of year as my skin gets dry. I rely on that to continue not feeling like sandpaper. Tubes & Co. is a family-run company. I actually know their owner, and she is just awesome, Emily Tubes. We text back and forth sometimes, and I support everything they're doing. So if you are looking to clean up your skincare routine, clean up your makeup, Tubes & Co. is offering Simple Farmhouse Life listeners 10% off your order with the code FARMHOUSE. So you can head over to tubesandco.com. That's TOUPS and co.com. Use the code FARMHOUSE. I know that you're going to love their products as much as we do. So what practices do you maintain to avoid distractions? This was actually an audience question, and the person said, I feel like I can implement ideas and strategies for a time, but then often something will trigger a regression into an old bad habit, and it's discouraging. So this is kind of like your story of the Israelites, right? Like you remember for a while and it's so clear, like it's so obvious, it's so true. And then over time, it's like, what happened? How do we get out of there?
Yeah. And that's the tricky part of it for all of us, because life changes, seasons change. Like right now, you're in a different season of life, right? Where you have more to manage and different things going on. And so
little baby I'm nursing.
Yeah, sleep isn't coming as readily. And I remember that when I was having babies. So then all of a sudden you're not sleeping. I could be in this great Bible reading plan and I'm doing 30 minutes every morning and memorizing verses. And then you have a baby and you don't sleep, or you have other things going on in your family that deprive your sleep at night. Like I'm just not sleeping well. And how am I going to be able to do that? So there's a million things that throw us off in that. And the one thing I love, first and foremost, is probably counterintuitive advice, is just that I love that God has grace with us here. I love that he knows our frame and knows that we are made from dust. So a heart that is set on following him is the goal, not lived out perfection, right? So when I mess that up, like, I had a plan to do that. And sometimes those are just simple practices. Sometimes it's, when I'm studying the Bible, I don't even have my phone around, right? Because I know it's a distraction for me. Does it need to be like that in every season? No, because like you said, sometimes I don't get in that habit pattern where I don't even notice if it's there. But if I notice I'm checking it because these things pop into my brain. Oh, I need to check the weather right now. Oh, I need to add that to the grocery list. So then I just take it and remove it away from me. But can I slip back into that habit? Yes, but he's faithful with me there too. Like I can trust the Holy Spirit to lead me and to remind me, as it says in John 14. So when I feel that conviction, like, oh, I don't want to be on my phone right now. So I just take the next step of trying again, right? Of just being faithful with the obedience of I'm removing that from me. So I think we are harder on ourselves than he is often. And he recognizes that heart that is trying to follow him. And again, he's not looking for perfection. So in that moment, I can pray, God, can you help me? I really want to do this well. I have to think that's a prayer he loves to answer, like a father, right? Mm-hmm. I seek to do this well and I mess it up. I keep tripping. But can you help me inch by inch get a little bit better at this?
Yeah, my favorite thing is that ever since I became a Christian, there's always these times where I realize that I've like not tried, but like my human self has tried to forget something. And then it's never like I don't at some point get convicted of it again. I'm like, okay, you never just completely let me go off the deep end here. Like at some point oh yeah, like that, I'm reminded again, but my thoughts, it doesn't usually happen while I'm scrolling. It usually happens in a moment of reading, the Bible or in prayer that I'm reminded again. And so God never completely lets you go, Now, one thing you talked about in the book that I thought it was so relatable, almost to the point where I'm like, oh, she just put it into words, but why do we do this? So we all deceive ourselves into thinking that just around the corner, there's going to be an easier season. Oh my word. Like, I do this so bad. I'm like, okay, when I get this certain project done or when the baby is this age, and now granted, I am a person who always has another baby and always takes on a new project. So maybe that's why, but like, I've heard it from people who, when I look at their lives, I'm like, oh, you got like nothing going on. Like, just comparatively, I don't even know how you feel stressed, but I mean, every single human does this to where we're like, oh, well, when things slow down, whenever this ends or that ends, we'll get together or we'll do this thing. And it's like, oh, you are such a liar to yourself. Like that's never going to happen.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? And I love learning from women that are a stage ahead of me in life. I love talking to them, like, tell me about, my oldest just turned 18 and graduated, but like, so tell me about empty nesting. I want to know what that's going to be
like. I've heard that's not like not busy too. Like that's busy. That's because like you think it's going to not be.
Right. You think that is the land. That's when I'm going to work out all the time and have all the things done and tidy all the time. And then
I've heard that's
you're
not
going to have
true.
grandkids come over. Maybe, that's going to make a mess and take time. And at the same time, you have to acknowledge that your capacity probably decreases, right? I'm a little more tired now than when I was 25. Like,
oh yeah, so I guess that's a thing, huh?
Right. Yeah. So it's working against you as you get more time, then you're a little more tired when you do have it. So I think recognizing that is, after it's depressing for half a second, it is wise to think, okay, wait, like there are seasons that are busier than others, right? We notice that even in our own life. It doesn't need to feel like chaos all the time. I was doing an interview the other day and the guy said, do you ever just feel like life is chaos? And I thought, there's seasons that are chaos, right? And that's okay. I can do that for a season. Like here we are, and God has called me to a lot of really heavy things. But after that, there's usually a season of rest. I can't live a whole life that's chaos. But at the same time, the work doesn't stop. And if there is a season that's quieter, God is probably going to put something new on your plate to fill that space. That's what we're called to do, right? This is the mandate that we're going to do good work in the world. So yeah, we get rid of that fallacy that it's going to be easier just around the corner, and we try our best to be faithful with what's right in front of us.
Right. It's okay. It's okay that it's busy. That's not really the goal, is to finally have this time where all of a sudden there's just nothing to do. None of us would really want that, but you need so
prideful.
Yeah, I know. But a lot of times it's like good things you want to do, like get together with a certain family from church or invite, this certain person. You're like, oh, well, when things slow down, just stop lying to yourself and invite them over right now, because it's not like the second I'm going to finish all these projects, it's going to be Christmas time. And, oh, we got all this Christmas stuff. And then there's always something, then it's garden season. We've got to be out in the garden. And so when things slow down, this summer, which, like... Not that either. Just not actually true. Okay, so another question from listeners is how to stay focused when there's millions of things going on around us. I guess really with that, like how do you figure out what's important? As a mom, in any given moment, there's about 5 things I could, like right now, if I wasn't on this interview, I could think of 4 or 5 other good things that I could be doing, like starting dinner, editing a video, just a lot. Like I could easily find something. If none of those were a thing, I could deep clean the bathroom, you know? So yeah, how do you stay focused and decide what's the good thing to do?
Yeah. I say this all the time. I don't think it's the battle of the good or bad. For me, I'm not going to park myself in the middle of the day and binge Netflix. That's not really a temptation for me.
No.
So it's not the good or the bad. It's the good against the good, and are we going to have them play sports and take music lessons and make homemade bread every day and make sure everything's clean and then do the math and the algebra? There's so many good things we can do. That it's always the good against the good. Usually, once you get it figured out, these are the things I want to live my life on. It doesn't necessarily or like base my life on. This is what I want to give myself to. This is the culture I want to create in my home. It isn't usually good versus bad. It's good versus better. So some of that is just setting out a priority. Okay, what are my priorities here? My first priority is my relationship with the Lord. So I'm going to make sure I get that done. Right. I'm going to make sure I connect with God today. That can look a whole lot different in different seasons, on different days, any of that. Right. But I'm going to make that a priority, and then it's my priority. If I'm homeschooling and I need to educate my kids, okay, this is a priority. Again, that can look different. That doesn't mean we have to get to this page or whatever in our book, but it means I'm going to make this a priority. And maybe the toilets aren't going to get cleaned quite as often in that busy season. Is cleaning your toilets a good thing? Yes, but maybe it happens every 2 weeks this season of life, right? I can kind of delegate by the priorities for my family, and some of those will be a little bit different. Maybe you have kids with allergies and getting the floor vacuumed every single day is a really important thing. Okay, that's going to look different for you than it looks for someone else. Or you have food allergies, so you need to cook differently. Okay, that's going to take a higher priority for you and your family than others. So maybe it would work to list those things out. If you have trouble deciding between the good and the good, I would say sit down with your husband. What matters to you? In a really busy season when I had a bunch of toddlers, a mentor encouraged me with that when I said, I'm not getting all the things done. And she said, have you ever sat and asked your husband what things really matter to him? Like just ask his opinion on a date night. What 3 things in the home? So the things that really matter to me, like the mudroom when he walks in, like I can shut the door on that mudroom. If that needs to be messy, that's messy. But that mattered to him because when he walks in the house through the mudroom, that's the first thing he sees is chaos in the mudroom. So I thought, oh, okay, that's one thing. That's pretty easy to have the kids tidy that up. So, and I would never even known that, but that matters to him. So that was kind of fun to recognize in that season. Okay, how can we work on the mudroom? And if the basement is what I have to let go this day, then I'll let the basement go. But it's just kind of figuring out with your home, with your family, what should these priorities look like? And know that it's okay. It'd be really good at dropping balls you don't need to carry in the season.
Right. Yep. You definitely cannot do everything. And so, it's going to look different for everybody to decide which things are priorities based on a lot of different factors. All right, we'll take a quick break from this awesome conversation to tell you about my 5-day blogging business challenge. So if you followed along for a while, you might know that Luke and I have done this exclusively from home, the blog business, for over 5 years now. He quit his job and we run my blog. Now, I also have since added, of course, a podcast. I have a YouTube channel, but the blog in itself could support our family. And I love the passive income that the blog provides. It's the least invasive for our family life. It's the easiest thing to work around. If I had to get rid of every aspect of my business, the blog would be the last to go. I love to help students learn how to do this for their own families, for their own idea, their own business, with my 5-day blog challenge. So this is 5 days to narrow down your niche, craft your brand, and come up with a content plan for a successful blogging business. Blogging is one of those things that people think is dead, and I'm here to tell you that it is the most profitable part of my business, so it is so not dead. But the reason they think that is because there's a strategy to it. It's not just a journal anymore. That kind of content's reserved for Instagram, for YouTube. It's different, but as big of an opportunity as ever. So if you are interested in figuring out, or you're just curious, it's totally free, about blogging, you can join my challenge by heading to bit.ly/5-day blog challenge. That's bit.ly/5 day blog challenge. It's case sensitive, so all lowercase. All right, hope that is helpful for you. Now, another question that somebody asked is finding ways to decompress as a mom without zoning out on the phone. And my first thought with that is, do you ever feel better after zoning out on your phone? Because that, for me, it's like the thing I want to do right now, but then whenever I get in like a book like yours, Bible study, I feel better afterwards. I have moments where I feel convicted and I feel inspired. And yet, why do our brains want to go to that? That's never restful.
Mm-hmm.
That's never something that makes us feel better when we're done with it. Like if you scroll through reels, I've had like nights like that. Like that's why I get rid of my Instagram app, because I'm like, I do not want to waste any time scrolling through reels because my brain just feels fried afterwards.
Yes.
So yeah, like what are some zoning out things for moms, which I'd argue that like on your phone isn't even a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a reader like you. So if I can just even get in 10 minutes of reading, if I just have time to waste, it's so easy to spend 10 minutes on our phone. Sometimes we don't think we have 10 minutes, but we would easily get distracted and waste 10 minutes looking at someone else's house paint colors or something like that, right? Or some influencer in the clothes that they're wearing and things that I don't need, but I could easily just grab a book. So do I have one handy? Do I put those resources in front of me? Do I have them available when I'm taking a kid to doctor's appointments? I'm always grabbing a book. Those are 10 minutes that I could not sit on a phone and I could actually learn something I want to learn. Or maybe it's just taking a walk. Physical exercise, super important, right? Can you just go out for 10 minutes out in front of your house and walk? Could you do something physical that you'd want? Could you have a really good conversation with your kids during this time, right? Is there a conversation I can have, or not with your kids, with the person in the waiting room? I mean, we used to do that. We used to talk to strangers and now we don't because everyone just pulls out their phone, right? So maybe think about when you're not in that moment, what are things that I could do and how could I put those things in front of me so I'm not just operating by what's right in my hand or my pocket at that moment.
Yeah, I think that is such good advice, having something handy. And another person talks about like wanting to learn new things, recipes, skills, but then how do you stay off screens when you want to do that? And my advice for that is just to take a little information and then try it. Don't find like 5,000 people telling you how to do it. Just get the info and then like almost like you read an article in a book and then try it. We have so much overwhelming information. Like you want to buy a new lip gloss and you read 25 reviews. Like it's just lip gloss. Like sometimes we just really overcomplicate stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, just the sheer amount of information we have available to us today is incredibly overwhelming. Like we should be so smart, right? It's all just there.
Yeah.
But so there's nothing wrong with using technology to learn those things, to watch someone make sourdough bread. But yeah, then go out and act upon it. What can I do with that information? So I sometimes, the thing that I think is really, really difficult about a phone is that the distance between being on task and being off task is a millisecond, right? Like it's just one quick swipe. Here I am on my phone to do something I want to do. And then I see this, and then I see this notification, then I think of this, and I'm way over here, which I wouldn't have been if I just pulled the recipe out of my recipe box, right? There's no options. It's just, here's the recipe. So not that we have to go just to those hard concrete tools, but sometimes when I'm on my phone, I will say out loud to remind the people around me and to remind myself, I'm just looking up this recipe really quick. Like I say it like a total weirdo, right? But I want to be accountable to these kids because they don't know what I'm doing. Like, is mom on Instagram? Or no, I'm actually doing really good work with this good tool that I have. But I'm reminding them what I'm doing so I can do it and then put it down and then go about my life. So I would just put some parameters around that. And I think that teaches them to be healthy users of technology as well. Yes, we use it for these tools, but then we set it down and move on with our life.
I really like that tip because somebody said in the questions that they want to, use it for recipes, taking photos, shopping lists, but they're afraid their kids are going to see them on it. Well, then instead just say what you're doing. That way they know what you're doing. That's a really good point. My husband sometimes like I'll be on my phone and he'll be like, what you got or what you looking at? And I'm like, oh, just Instagram. I like it better whenever I have something like, oh, I was, adding to our Walmart Plus order. But, oftentimes that's his way of being like, so what you doing on there? I thought we were,
Which is healthy. Yeah. That's a healthy reminder. And our technologies are so isolating because we don't know what people are doing. At least we could open the newspaper before and we can see that, oh, they're reading the newspaper, but we don't know if someone's taking in the news, looking at their bank account. So I think it is important. I love that your husband checks in with you. That's one way we can help each other, right? Because we get derailed so easily. So then, he just says that and it makes you think, oh man, I wish I could say I was reading an intellectual article, but I'm looking at someone else's clothes or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's something productive. But a lot of times it's his way of being like, get off your phone,
much cuter.
What you got on there? What you doing? Something productive. Okay. So before we go, let's talk a little bit about time with God, especially when you have a bunch of little kids. Someone says, any guidance on deciding what endless household tasks to put to one side and to prioritize spending time with God instead?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think I would say I would set aside almost any household task to make sure I spend time with the Lord. And I'm not talking about a half hour so nothing gets done and the meals don't get made, right? You have good work to do. And I think we honor Christ by providing meals for our family. So sometimes we make that maybe too much of a dichotomy. Well, I didn't read my Bible. Well, did I serve in my home to the glory of God? Did I have those conversations so they can see that as my act of worship, right? So maybe it looks a little different in that season. I used to be a super, well, I guess I come by it by nature to be really disciplined in the things I do, right? That's kind of my lane, okay? So when I first started reading the Bible, when I was a really young mom, I was like, I'm going to have a checklist and I'm going to do this. And that becomes easy for me, right? When I have a checklist, I'm just going to do it no matter what. I remember one day when I had a baby get up all night. I was super tired. It was all like the night to the day. There was no line between it. There was no demarcation. We're just moving into the day. Here we go. And I had a really sweet day with my kids. I felt like you could just feel like the Lord's grace over it. Some days are like that, right? He's just helping me. He's helping me with patience today. It's just working. I remember going to bed and laying there and thinking, oh my goodness, I did not even read my Bible today. Like, oh, he could really be present with me when I didn't check things off the list, right? So it's important not to make it about a list. But if I want to develop relationship with him, if I want to know God, right? If that is something important in my heart, then I'm probably going to do that before I clean the toilets today. And even if it just looks like one verse that I could meditate on, that I could just have that in my mind while I'm cleaning the toilets, right? It all counts because it's all us pursuing Christ, us knowing him. So it's kind of walking that line. We don't have to fall off either side between legalism and like, he knows I love him, we're good, right? I can pursue relationship without making it something like a list that has to be checked every single moment.
Yeah. And it's surprising too that some things we build up in our brains, like whether that's household tasks or even having a moment with God, don't take much time. Like we were like, oh man, I don't have time every day to insert like literally anything. And it's something that would take 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm guilty of this 100%, but there's so many things like, oh, I don't have time for that. And it's like, well, or do you just really not prioritize it? Because you definitely do have time for that.
Yeah. Yeah, here's a fun challenge. Just to read a chapter of the Bible, right? Just like one chapter. Pick anyone. Just don't pick Psalm 119, but pick any other chapter of the Bible, right? And maybe set your timer to see how long it takes you. Or maybe just a section. Like it doesn't, there's no rule that it has to be in chapters, but I think it takes far less time than we need to. I did this once. I don't always like folding laundry. Now I have older kids who do all that. Right. But I remember the mountains of laundry when they were toddlers, and I would make it a bigger deal in my mind. Like, oh, yes, I have to fold that basket of laundry. And then I remember timing myself, and it was like 90 seconds. It was 90 seconds. Like I was really complaining for an hour about that 90-second task. When you get to work, you're right. It doesn't take what we think it does in our mind. Deal.
I know. Yeah. I tell people with sourdough all the time too, because people are like, sourdough. And I'm like, once you know what you're doing with it, which I understand that it's a lot of times it's getting over the learning curve to the point where it will only take you 5-10 minutes. But like literally the act of putting the dough together and stretching and folding it, we're not talking hours a day. Like it's not something you have to just be like, I'm in my kitchen all the time. This is it. It's not really that much time at all when you add it all up. But we can, I mean, I've done it with a million things, not that. Like I have so many things in my life I'm doing that with, but the things that I'm in a habit of, I notice other people doing it with, of course, because it's the thing that I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, that's not a big deal, you know? And, but I think everything's kind of like that to an extent. I'm sure there's some time consuming things, but even like working out, like I don't work out. I don't have time to work out. It's like, you don't have 20 minutes, like 2 or 3 times a week, really?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for sharing all your wisdom. Tell us where we can find the book, follow along with you, and learn more.
Yeah, the book, But Then She Remembered, is available on Amazon and Christian Book and kind of all the places there.
All the places,
you can find me on my website, katiewestenberg.com, and occasionally on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Right. Well, thank you so much for listening and or watching this episode of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. Definitely go get this book. Katie is such a good author. She has a way with words. So the book is very enjoyable to read. I'm really enjoying it. I'm going to finish it. And I don't read a ton. Like, honestly, I like to, and I wish I would, but this one is just so important, so good. So again, the book is But Then She Remembered, and I will see you in the next episode of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast.